In this video, I'm going to be testing out the Sony's internal electronic variable ND and testing out just exactly how well it works when you're out filming on a partly cloudy day. Here's the story. As you can see, right now I'm outside of the studio and I'm recording on the Sony FX6, and currently we have the electronic variable ND activated and it is set to auto. And right now it is currently the middle of winter in Melbourne, Australia, and it's a partly cloudy day. And right now you might be able to tell that the sun is going behind clouds right now. There's a little bit more sun coming out, a little bit I can feel on the side of my face right now. And let's just see how the variable ND is going to be able to cope with the slight changes in the lighting conditions. As a control, I do have my Sony a7S III as a second camera, and I'll be able to show at the end of this video just exactly how much difference there is in the lighting variations, and then I can put that side by side with the Sony FX6 footage as well to see if there is much of a noticeable difference. Right now I have the AE set to plus 0.5 stops on the Sony FX6, and what that does is lets the camera know to expose half a stop more than what the auto exposure would typically expose at. Sony's internal electronic variable ND is probably a feature that you've heard a lot about on YouTube. This is one of the key features on the Sony FX6 that sets it apart from the Sony a7S III, and it is a very helpful tool to have if you do a lot of filming outside. So if you're a wedding videographer and you're outside shooting a lot, having this internal electronic variable ND is something that would be very helpful for when you're running and gunning and trying to get every shot as the best you can in that one take. You don't need to be worrying about putting on filters, changing the variable ND. You just have to turn on the electronic variable ND, and if you have the settings set up correctly, it'll then do the rest and hopefully get the results that you are looking for. Currently, I'm shooting on the Sony 35mm f1.8 and my aperture is currently set to f4. Now, with the internal variable ND, it goes from 2 stops to 7 stops. So I can't actually fully maximize the full aperture on this lens and go to a 1.8, because if I did, my shot will be overexposed. Obviously, if you're needing to shoot at an f1.8 and 7 stops is not enough, you do have the option to screw on extra filters on the front of your lens. Obviously, in the future, it would be nice to have more than 7 stops of internal ND, maybe 10 stops. However, I'm not really complaining. It's just something to note that in future releases, we might be able to see more of. And the way that the Sony FX6 calculates the different stops that it uses in the ND is that it starts at 2 stops, which is indicated by 1/4, and then 3 stops is 1/8, then 4 stops is 1/16, then 5 stops is 1/32, then 6 stops is 1/64, and 7 stops is 1/128. And 1/128 is the maximum 7 stops that the Sony FX6 has with the internal variable ND. Right now, my color temperature is set to 5600, and hopefully this image is exposed correctly. I won't really know because I'm out here filming by myself, and I won't really know until I get back to the edit suite, but hopefully it is doing a great job and I'll be very pleased with the footage when I get back to the studio. I'm also shooting in S-Log3, so I do have the ability to be able to color correct or change the levels of the image in post. This is definitely something that is handy to have with S-Log3 and the internal variable ND, just to have that extra flexibility in post, because if you don't always nail your exposure when you're out in the field, it's always good to have that little bit of backup when you get back to that edit suite. Recording in 10-bit is essential as well when shooting with log, and that's what I'm doing right now, shooting in 4K as well, 25p. Right now, because I'm filming out in the field by myself, I do have autofocus set, and I do have it set to face and eye priority. And with the Sony FX6 as well, it does have that mode where in autofocus where you can just select that it only looks for a face, and then if the face exits the frame, it won't then lock onto the background. And here's an example of that. And hopefully that illustrated exactly what I just said and I don't look silly right now. The only criticism that I've heard about the internal variable ND so far is that sometimes it might affect autofocus. I personally haven't really noticed any of that in my recording so far. However, I will keep testing this out, and if I ever do find problems with the autofocus and using the internal variable ND, I'll definitely be making a video about it, so stay tuned for that one. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit subscribe and then you won't miss that video. So overall, with the internal variable ND, I'm really impressed with how it works. It just makes it so much easier to be able to record the shots that you need to get when you're out in the field. I love that I'm able to just set my settings with the camera. So set the f-stop, set the ISO, set the shutter degree as well, and then I can just let the camera do the rest when I turn on that internal variable ND. And that's the video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel for more videos on video creation in the future.